Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of What I Learned on my MBA today. And tonight I thought I would help you all get to sleep by talking about resource allocation in multi-project environments. Well, what can you say? Actually, quite a lot. Multi-project environment is one where a significant proportion of the company revenue comes from project-based work, and typically these are characterized by having a large proportion of employees working on multiple projects at the same time. So essentially what you end up with is a situation where you have competing projects. You have employees needing to be split as resources between different projects, so the prioritization becomes a key issue. And that leads to politicking on the part of the project managers, because the only way they can guarantee that their project gets the right employees and funding is by making their projects seem the most critical. You've got fundamental supply and demand side issues, at least in theory, where the resource is the guys who are going to be working on the project. So from the demand side, problems are around really scheduling and overcommitment. Overcommitment being the generally committing to too much work. So it's what's termed the canary cage issue. So you've got a bird cage with canaries in, and you chuck an extra canary in without actually thinking of what that's going to do to the canaries already there. Fish people could say that the fish tank metaphor would be much the same. When you introduce a new fish, you have to be very careful that it's going to live happily with the others, and they need a certain amount of space, and you've got the right oxygenation, filtering, etc., etc. It's the same with projects. If you're just putting more and more projects in, you need to make sure they've got the right sort of environment in which to live. You can tell I'm really tired. I'm I was going to say personifying projects. I'm not. I'm animalifying them. There must be a word for that. If there isn't, let's make one. Then on the supply side, you have possibly bigger problems, because that's where it gets really dysfunctional. You've got management accounting systems which can be just completely unsuited to a project environment. For example, utilization rates of people, if they're working on projects, I always termed billable work when I was at CSC, and so the incentive is to keep everyone on billable work at all times. However, that's not necessarily the best thing. If you want to actually improve your group productivity, you sometimes do need to have people actually sitting back, figuring out what's going on, how to work properly, prioritizing and managing time and resources. And in many cases, that's not considered to be useful by senior management, or at least not by the accounting system. So you end up actually disincentivizing things that would bring benefits to the business. Then you've also got the way project managers act, kind of hiding or stealing resources from other projects. Every project manager, of course, thinks their project's the most important because that's the one they're paid for completing. This can manifest in some very nasty ways. You've got, of course, the typical jockeying, politicking for resources to try to get management to buy into my project being, of course, far more urgent and critical and vital than everyone else's. But when culture goes really bad, you can end up in a situation where PMs, project managers, actually start sabotaging projects, because if they can bring the project to an absolute crisis point, they can have a much stronger argument to go to senior management and say, I need more resources. And of course, there's so many problems with that, but that's why it's dysfunctional. There are problems, and no one seems to notice or care. So what's this really saying? Well, firstly, if you're looking at a multi-project environment, you need to be really clear that there are some major concerns which seem to be under-researched. The paper I was reading actually says there's very little real research that goes beyond someone's personal experiences, and often those are strongly based in a particular industry sector or project type, naturally enough. Instead, you need to go beyond just what it looks like and actually start looking at the deep structure of the organisation. You need to look at the incentive systems, the accounting systems, the way management actually works. And I would say that all of this really means you're looking at culture, particularly when you're looking at that supply side stuff, the really dysfunctional, disturbing bit. That to me is a cultural issue. The demand side is the scheduling, the overcommitting. That's a problem, but I would say that's an estimation of forecasting and maybe reality perception sort of problem, rather than a real "what on earth are you doing" problem. So yes, you can certainly have these cultural issues. I find this a very interesting thing. It certainly fits very well with what I found, what I saw when I was working in a very project-based environment at CSC. We had a lot of this stuff, and now looking back, having read this paper, I'm wondering whether some of those projects might have been being deliberately sabotaged, because certainly there were, well, how else do you explain some of the problems they had? And certainly the behaviour of this project is in a crisis, therefore we need to give it more resources. That was quite common. So this is quite realistic. What I'm reading here, it's disturbing. I don't like seeing this. Strikes me this is really quite an unhealthy way to run a business, but it does come down to how you handle this project structure. I don't think that it's an inherent thing in a project-based system, but it's something that is clearly a risk of how things can go if you have maybe the wrong people, the wrong incentives, the wrong management structures. So there you go, something to think about for tonight. And I hope you've managed to follow this and you're still awake. And I will see you again tomorrow. Be seeing you.